What's up? This is Chuck, and you listen to the ITXP. Today, we have a guest who actually reached out to me to have a conversation. And see, I told you all that I'm always willing to have a conversation about your journey. You just need to take that first step. Today, we ask a question on what happens when a seasoned enterprise veteran, someone who spent nearly 2 decades at a giant utility company, decides to dive headfirst into the world of open source and Web3 startups. Today, I'm joined by Don Freeman. Don's career spans from installing Linux in the 90s to managing decade-long waterfall projects. Doesn't everyone love waterfall projects? And ultimately, to being recruited by a startup because of his contributions to the Ethereum ecosystem. So, Don, you're one of the few people whom I've met was seeing the absolute scale of a massive utility provider and the breakneck speed of a modern startup. So we're going to deconstruct that today. And Don, welcome to the ITXP.
Thanks for having me, Charles. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So Don, you reach out to me, which almost never happens. I think you're the 5th person that I've interviewed in my 10-year career here at the ITXP. And before we dissect anything else, I want you to tell your story. Right. Yeah. So take me from day one at the utility company to day one at SonarX. You don't have to go into that detail, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
No.
And if you can hit 3 chapters, right? So how you got into tech, what those years at the utility company were really like, because I think a lot of people want to understand that. And then what changed when open source entered the picture? I won't interrupt, so just let you tell that as happens, and we'll kind of have this conversation.
Yeah, so early on, like I said, in the 90s, like I was that kid who I was looking for, like, I just loved playing with Linux, right? So any flavor of Linux I could download, and it was on dial-up at the time, right? So I was downloading different Linux versions over dial-up. You know, someone would pick up the phone in the middle of a download and have to start over again. So that's where my journey initially started, was in the 90s, as a 11, 12-year-old and doing that. So I always loved software. I always loved computers. When it came time to go to college, I was looking at, different degrees and whatnot, and I decided to go down the electrical engineering path. And so that had, some software in there, but it was more about, physics, electrical engineering, so on and so forth. And so I ended up naturally kind of at the local power utility in the area. And my first job there was like designing power lines. So if a commercial customer, a real estate customer, a residential customer came on and they needed power, like I would go meet with them, talk about their needs and design power lines, right? So I did that for 5 years. And there's always, around that time, there's always new like software coming along. So these projects would spin up, and at a large enterprise, waterfall was the name of the game at the time. And I constantly kept getting sucked into these projects, right? So eventually I was like, I see this is really where I want to take my future, right? So I started back down the software route and joining those projects, helping, roll out new systems, retire legacy systems, so on and so forth. And, like I said, a lot of those projects, could be 5-10 years long, from the planning all the way to the deployment. You'd have these giant releases where it would take 2 weeks of an outage or whatnot to release this giant piece of software. And then came along, probably somewhat after COVID, 2022 type time frame, somewhere around there, I would say. I was like, so I feel like I'm a pretty good practitioner of what I'm doing right now, right? Like, what's my next thing? Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, where am I going with this? Because I loved what I was doing, but I was just looking for a new, like, challenge. Because I think one thing I've decided or figured out over my career is, like, there's not many things I couldn't, like, dive deep into and figure out a solution and learn and kind of build that skill set, right? And so, and go into that in a minute, but so my next thing was like, okay, this crypto thing's going on right now, right? So like, it seems like that's kind of the future of some things. So I started reading about it and learning about it and kind of diving in deep. And I did that for a couple of weeks, right? I was just like learning and reading and consuming as much as I could about it. And then after that, I was like, well, I guess I kind of understand how some of it works now. What am I going to do now? Again, what am I going to, so I was like, let me get involved in something where I actually get to like put to work some of the things that I've been learning. And so, I didn't go straight out of the gate like, hey, let me go find a job in crypto or something like that. I was like, let me just look for something, again, goes back to my Linux roots in the 90s of like, hey, open source software I love, right? So let me just look for something in that realm to go work and learn more on, right? And so I ran across, I had a lot of experience in Python at the time, so I ran across the Ethereum Foundation, and they had this, it was called web3.py. It was the kind of the SDK, for lack of a better word, for Ethereum for Python. And so I started contributing there, and it started off with like document updates, right? Like, oh, these couple little tidbits don't sound right, or we need some more elaboration there. So I did that. And I got to know the folks that were like working, who were, reviewing my PRs and so forth. And it just kind of built from there. So I started learning what the roadmap was for that library, and started kind of to contribute even more and more. And then to SonarX. So SonarX was, they were looking for someone in the space, and they started to see some of my contributions to this open source software. And so they reached out to me, and we talked for a while, back and forth, but eventually I ended up, moving on and moving over to SonarX. And that's where I'm at now. And so, as you alluded to kind of earlier, is a big difference between working in a giant corporation that is, to all the way to a startup, right? And one of the main things I've come to learn and love is like, we move like really fast, right? So it's not a 10-year project. It's a 10-day project, or like, hey, we have this new product vision. How do we enable it? And again, it doesn't take months and years to get to that vision. It's like days to get to that vision, and like impacting the customer. So that's why I really, kind of went all in and like really enjoy that feedback, immediate feedback from customers about, what you're releasing and the products you're building, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the whole story.
So one thing I wanted to hone in on, so you said around COVID time.
Yeah.
So was there one specific thing that happened at the utility company that precipitated this kind of shift? Or was it just kind of the hype around crypto that you said, hey, how can I play a role in this? Because look, you were comfortable at the utility company, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you were just seeing maybe there was no path forward for you. It was kind of stagnant. You were dealing with these waterfall projects, or was there something that really precipitated that shift for you in your mindset that said, hey, let me take a look at this?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the thing where I've never found something that I couldn't dig into, learn, and build on that skill. And that was kind of the thing that was big at the time, right? It was like crypto was really taking off, and I was like, okay, if I'm looking for the next thing of like the next skill I could learn, right. That was it. So I think that's what kind of drove me in that direction.
Gotcha. And so walk me through that day SonarX called you. Like, do you remember that day? What were you doing? Was it after you committed something to one of the web3.py code?
Yeah. So when they first contacted me, it was I researched them a little bit and looked into it and whatnot, and I was like, these guys seem like they're doing some exciting stuff, and actually, the things I've been working on and learning about, they're trying to take that to the next level. And so I met with them, talked it over, kind of what their roadmap was and where they were looking at taking the company and so forth, and ultimately decided like, hey, that's I think where I want to go, and it's been a tremendous learning curve. I've got a new respect for big data, what I used to think was big data, right? Since I've joined the crypto space, because like we're just talking petabytes and petabytes of data, and the crypto industry really has a data problem in that everybody thinks it's like, oh, it's like, I went into it with the open source mind frame, right? Oh, it's open source and it's public, and like you can like get to any of the data you want to, but it's like really hard to understand a lot of this data and like consume and like and just make sense of it, right? So that's why that was kind of their pitch to me, was like, let's do that, as a team. And so I jumped in with them and went that way.
So what do you tell your friends and family when you say, hey, I'm pivoting from this safety net of a utility company to this startup? Like, what was that mindset? What was that discussion like?
Yeah, it was honestly, it was a lot of conversation, a lot of thinking about it over time, because that was like, I even had trouble, like when saying that to people, they're like, wait, hold on. Like you worked at the utility for 17, 18, whatever years. And now you're going to go work in the crypto space. So it was a big shift, but, ultimately in the end, I think it's been great. I have a lot of new skills, I think now that I've gotten out of that kind of safety net, and went and kind of built my own, I guess, future, for lack of a better word, through open source software, right? And I still have a huge passion for it and what open source brings to the software engineering community, and the ability to collaborate. And I know it has its goods and its bads, and people debate about large corporations and open source and whatever things, but I stand by. I think it's a big impact on software engineering as a whole.
Cool. So I want to go back to your utility company story, because I want to focus in on something that maybe some people don't understand, because I think a lot of the younger generation, let's say, those that started in corporate America or technology in the past 10 years, right? Have really had this agile mindset. You talk about waterfall. Maybe some people haven't heard about waterfall as like us, and that have been around for 25 plus years, right? So you talk about 5-year waterfall projects, 10-year waterfall projects. What did that teach you that people dismiss too easily, right? Because we're all in the agile space. Can you really hone in on that? The
number one thing I can always say about that transition from waterfall to agile, and then even it kind of replays itself in the transition for me into a startup, is that with waterfall projects, by the time you delivered the project, you had missed the business need, right? Like you started this whole analysis and everything up front, and then you worked on the design and the requirements documents and everything. And by the time you got to implementation and releasing the testing and so forth, and then releasing, especially on the larger projects, that whole business needed shifted, right? Like 5 years in technology is huge, right? If you're talking about a project that big. So the business request of a requirement 5 years prior may not even be valid anymore, And so that's the really thing that again, it comes with its goods and bads about agile, what's the right framework, blah, blah, so on and so forth. But I think one thing they all kind of hold true is that, like, you talk to the business, you document what they're looking for, and you quickly deliver it and get feedback from them. Was this what you wanted? Instead of say, okay, I'll see you in a year or so, and see if it's what you were actually looking for,
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things a lot of technologists miss out on, is actually talking to the business.
Yeah.
And really understanding, right? Especially those in larger enterprise organizations. I started at a small consulting company and then moved into Fortune 500. But I've always maintained that ability to connect with the business partners, the business units, right? Those within the business that really have those pain points. Yeah. So I think that's a really key focus that you brought up, is talking to the business, right? Those waterfall projects, to your point, 5 years later, the business is like, I moved on. That's not a problem anymore. Yeah. So it's a really key highlight to point out, because I think those that are either breaking into tech today, whether they're graduates or trying to pivot into tech, should also keep that in mind, that the business is key, right? Because we are business enablers, and we want to make sure that we understand the business pain point. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's really a distinction between those waterfall projects and agile, and even to the startup world.
I would say, just to jump in there real quick, I would say that's one of the biggest skills. If young software engineers are listening to this, one of the biggest skills that I would say is needed in software engineering is people get, okay, go build this for me, right? And then you talk to them a couple of days later or whatever, as they're working on it, like, well, why are we doing this? Like, why are we even building this feature? And there's no connection back to the why, And so actually building those skills around communication and talking to, whoever your business is, maybe it'd be an external customer or a customer within your corporation or whatever. having that ability to understand why are we even doing the work we've been asked to do, you know?
Yep, that's a good point. So sticking with the enterprise again, because I really want to kind of hone in on this, and then kind of comparing it to the startup. So talk to me about what good work actually meant at the utility company versus what good work means today in a startup world.
Yeah, sure. So at the enterprise company, I was more of the organization I worked within that company was more of the team delivered software for internal customers, right? And so success at that meant that we kept the application running. We added features here and there along the way. Every 10 years or so, you'd swap out for another big suite of applications, you know. But the success meant like my internal business customers have a tool that they can use to do their job, right? Success and startup has become, because we're more interfacing with external customers, right? So success to that means we built a product that we see people consuming, right? Like we have metrics and monitoring, whatever, or we're talking to our customers and whatnot. We're like, boom, we hit the mark there. They're like, everybody loves this. So it's quite a different feel than, hey, I delivered this new feature for someone to do their internal job versus we had this idea of a product, we built it, and now people are consuming it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So let's talk about that turning point. So it's COVID time period. You're looking for something to, dig your heels in and kind of eat. So you see this Python Web3 contribution, right? You start contributing to it. You said you started, updating documentation, things like that. Realistically, how many hours are we actually talking about that you put into that before someone at SonarX reached out to you?
I mean, it was a lot. It's hard to say, like, all in all, how many it was, but it was, at the end of the day, I wasn't doing it to get recognition. So I didn't see it as like, hey, I'm sinking these hours into something for nothing. I was doing it to kind of improve the, community or give back or whatever you may want to call it now, as well as grow my skills. Right.
Right.
And so, it's hard to say how many hours totally, but, it was a decent amount. I mean, I was at the time one of the, if you look on the GitHub or whatever, one of the higher up contributors to the project. So it was a decent amount, and then learning it too. I would say if someone's wanting to get into open source or really anything, right? Like when you first start on something, don't get discouraged by the fact that it does take a lot of time to meet the people, to learn the technology, to really break into that, and so it does take time for sure.
I want to touch on the data topic because you brought it up, right? And I think it's going to be key, especially for those trying to start into software engineering. And I'm seeing data myself playing a pivotal role in how things are getting done, especially now with this AI space, right? Yeah. We talk about in my current organization that we really can't build good AI agents without clean data, right? Yeah. So from your experience now at SonarX, what do you do to currently track that data and make sure it's clean, right? Make sure it's actually good data. Can you talk about some of that?
Yeah. So I think one of the good things about starting this whole thing fresh is because I've again worked on large projects where you're stuck with a bunch of bad data and you got to figure out how to clean it up. That's a bad place to be in. But we started from the beginning of, hey, we want to make sure data quality is a part of this. Right. And so from the very beginning, we started implementing data quality metrics. We can even show our customers around like, hey, how this is our data quality and so forth. And so I think that was our biggest plus, is that from day one, we were thinking data quality, because that's kind of, SonarX is a data infrastructure company in the Web3 space. So we knew that was our core business offering, was to have high quality, easily accessible data. And so we built data quality in day one. And that's helped a ton. And honestly, when talking to customers and so forth, that's one of their main questions, because they've all been stuck with bad data before, Right. Yeah. And so that's actually been a huge plus for us that we built. We spent the time early, and probably took longer to launch some certain products because we put time into data quality.
So what's one of the misconceptions people have around data in your field, right? In the Web3 space?
One of the biggest misconceptions, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is everyone thinks it's easy to access the data, right?
Right.
Again, when I first got into the Ethereum thing, I was like, oh, well, this is like everything's like open and free and we can just get whatever we want to. But the data is just not structured correctly to be able to do any real type of analytics on it or implement like real time streaming or like just really get to the data that you can make business decisions on easily, right? So I think that's the biggest misconception in the Web3 space is everyone thinks it's just open and there and they can access it. And we see a lot of people on that journey of like, oh, I can just run my own, whatever chain you may be saying, run my own node and access the data that way, right? And then that becomes cumbersome and they start to see data quality issues and so forth. And they're like, oh, well, I see why now SonarX is here is because they've solved those problems, you know?
Right.
So
one thing I always focus on, especially when I'm talking to folks that are really data driven, how do you balance data driven decisions between your own gut feeling or intuition?
I mean, that's a good question. Maybe elaborate a little bit more on what
So right now I deal with a number of project managers and data folks that build these Power BI reports and they're showing the trends and things like that. And I'm looking at that. I'm looking at those reports like, oh, these are nice. These are brilliant. These are great. And I start honing in on some of those questions because, I've been in the industry 25 plus years and my intuition tells me that what they're seeing really doesn't translate to what my experiences have shown me to believe, right? And so instead of really driving some of those decisions purely on data, how do you interject your own intuition into that?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can use your data to prove your intuition, right? You know what I'm saying? Like I have this feeling about what is the reality, but if you don't have data to back it up, you're just like, oh, I'm this guy and I have this feeling, you know what I'm saying? And so getting people on board with you, like, is really hard sometimes,
Right.
You may be the smartest person in the room or whatnot, but it's like you don't have anything to back you up, right? So having that data easily accessible and being able to show that to people helps get buy-in and so forth on maybe an idea or an intuition you may have. So that's the way I think I would look at it.
Yeah, cool. So sticking with the data topic, how do you communicate complex data insights to non-technical stakeholders, right? Because you're dealing with external folks. My assumption is most of them aren't really that technical, right? Maybe some are, maybe they have some people in there that are, but those decision makers that really actually sit at the table with you, how do you break those complex insights down to them?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think we have at SonarX is that where we don't see that quite as much is we're kind of like the base layer, right? So a lot of times our clients are the consumers who are then aggregating some of that data or making a decision based on like a signal that it's event-driven architecture that's sent out, or something like that. So we're kind of more at the base level. So it's usually our clients, I think, that are more the ones who are communicating some of those insights out as they, are consuming our data. But at the end of the day, I think, understanding the question is the biggest part, right? Finding the data sometimes not as hard to do. It's understanding what are you actually trying to question. Because a lot of times people look at a sea of data and they'll be like, okay, this is great, but I need to understand what I'm even looking for to like make sense out of it, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that has to be overcome is actually understanding what you're looking for.
Okay. Cool. Now I'm going to shift this a little bit to the listener, right? Because we have a lot of people listening, and they may be at their utility company today, right? Sure. They're sitting at their desk. They're like, Don, you really did something good here.
Yeah.
Right? How can I pivot this? So based on what you just told us, can you come up with like a 90-day plan for someone starting out today? Like they listen to this episode and they're really jazzed up and they're like, you know what? I'm going to jump into some open source projects.
Yeah.
What would be a 90-day plan for them if they wanted to start out today?
I mean, again, it goes back to when you asked how many hours did I put into it? And my response really was like, I don't know, because I was really doing it because I was passionate about it. And so one thing is finding what you're passionate about. I mean, that could be any number of things, right? But there's like open source projects out there for literally anything and everything you could ever imagine.
Yes, sir.
But I would advise against if you're trying to learn a new skill or you're trying to break into a new space, is I wouldn't start something on your own. Like initially, that was just my feedback. I know some people have done it and been very successful at it, but I've always found that like jumping in with people who know the space that I'm trying to get into has always been more beneficial to me than me just going in and kind of making it up on my own, right? Like interacting with knowledgeable people. So finding the topic that inspires you. Second, finding a place where people are doing the thing that you're inspired by, right? And then not just like trying to sit back and consume and consume the knowledge, but more interacting with people, right? Not just sitting there reading a Discord or whatever, mechanism for communication there is, but actually interacting, right? Like talking to those people, sending an email, picking up a phone if you have a phone number, whatever it may be, but like interacting with those people who are doing the things that you're inspired to do. And I think you'll really quickly start to find opportunities to grow those skills. And there's always, the landscape's always changing and so forth. And I think that just kind of opens up opportunities to happen. And then the whole thing comes full circle. So that would be my suggestion.
Let me ask you this question. Are you a more extroverted person or introverted person? Because I'm thinking Linux, graybeards, right? The guy sitting in the background, in the back end. So what's your personality like?
So I would say I am introverted, but I know I need to be extroverted in order to do reach the goals I want to get to, right?
Right.
So, I mean, like, again, where I mentioned like reaching out to people, especially when you're reaching out to people who know more about something than you do, sometimes that can be very intimidating, right? And
Absolutely.
And so, I think just, and again, I have actually been involved in some open source projects where people, may not have had the nicest feedback, and you just go on and move. Like, don't let that hinder you, and you just move on and go to your next thing or whatever it may be. But I would say, to answer your question, I would say I'm an introverted person who becomes extroverted in order to reach my goals.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's good. So what part of your story is unrepeatable luck versus a replicable process? Right. Because again, I'm sitting at my desk or a cubicle, or I'm just sitting in my house, after a long day of, at work, dealing with some BS from my management team. And I'm like, how do we do what Don did? Right.
Yeah.
So how much of it was luck versus something that somebody else could replicate?
Well, I mean, I think the luck piece was that I put myself in a position to be discovered by a startup, as well as other people,
Right.
So that didn't have to happen. So I guess that piece would be the luck. But I think if you put in the work and the time, things will eventually break loose and move in the direction you want them to move. It's in my mind, and I know it doesn't always hold true, but in my mind, it's a factor of time and work and kind of putting yourself out there.
And I think that's key, because I think if everyone takes a step back and look at their trajectory of their own career, a lot of times they'll realize that you actually did put into work to do something to get to where you're at. Right. Yeah. You may not see it because you've been in the trenches for so long. And me just doing this show over the past 10 years, right, has given me the opportunity to take a step back. It's like, I've actually done some things, right, that not many people have done. Right. And it's just because of, to your point, the passion, right? You have to have that passion first and the desire to want to actually do something. Right. Okay. Maybe a little motivation as well. Right. But the ability just to start something, to start somewhere and continuing that momentum will lead to something eventually. And this is one of the things I tell my kids as well. They're teenagers, right? Getting ready to go into college. It's like a lot of times things aren't just going to fall in your lap. right? A lot of times, you're going to be doing the mundane work, but if you compound that mundane work over the span of maybe a year or two, you'll realize that, like, holy cow, I've learned a lot from where I did last year. And I even tell my team this, right? Because we're building an automation platform for cloud infrastructure that hasn't been done at the company before. So I said, if you look at back where you were 4 months ago, you had no idea what you're doing. And now 4 months later, you're building this platform that other people are using. You take that and continue to grow. So I think it's key to your point. Just start, right? Yeah. Once you start and you continue doing it, you'll build that skill set and you'll find yourself maybe at a startup. Right?
Yeah. So 2 things jump out at me about that is one is I think a lot of people see, like the instant success, right? Like,
yes.
Linus Torvald created the Linux kernel and blah, 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 like these big successes, but don't necessarily think about like that took years and years and years of effort. And then finally it hit an inflection point and took off. Right. So that's one thing is things, unless you're just like one of these super lucky people, which most people are not, right? It's just like things take work. You may not, when you're looking at someone who got to a position that you want to get to, you may not see the work sometimes that they put in.
Yeah, and I blame social media for that, right? Because it's always that instant gratification, that just instant, like the 5-second clips, like, hey, here's what I'm doing, right? First of all, a lot of that may be fake, right? Nobody really knows the reality of it. And secondly, a lot of times it takes, that effort. I'm a big fan of comedy, right? And some of the stories that you hear from those comedians are like, I busted my ass 15, 20 years and look, here I am, right? Yeah. It's not like I was an overnight success. Right, exactly. I became it. You know about my success because of social media, but it really took me this long to get to where I am. So I think that really needs to resonate with more and more people, because that instant gratification is just, I think, really killing some of the success stories, or I should say the dreams of people that want to be successful, right? Yeah. Because first of all, you have to find what success means to you, because success isn't the same for everybody. Sure. Yeah. Right. And then secondly, you have to put in the work and continue build before somebody can actually see it. And then, grow from there, like you, right? You put in the hours, right, to that contribution, and somebody saw it. Right? They saw it, and you had conversations, and here you are at a startup. So I think that's really key. Going back to your enterprise skill set, right? What's one skill set, enterprise skill set, I should say, that would be a secret weapon at a startup?
Being able to run systems at scale, right? So like, at a startup, especially when you come out with a new product, you may not have any customers. You might have 1 customer, you might have 10 customers, or you may have a lot of customers, whatever. But especially when you're first starting and you're iterating, the scale is smaller than at an enterprise where you may have 20,000 customers already, or maybe even more. Who knows? You may be looking at requests per second. You see thousands coming in per second, where at a startup is smaller. But I think where I had to learn a little bit switching was like, I went into a startup thinking, okay, I have to build everything for all this resiliency and failover and everything. And some of that's iterative, right? You know where you need to go because you've seen what can happen, but you don't have to have it all day one, right? Like you don't need a full Kubernetes cluster with high availability and everything else day one, because that slows you down from getting that feedback we talked about, like you can't get something to the customer to get feedback. So I think it's learning. I knew what could happen because of my experience in a large corporation, like from failures and so forth, like waking up at night to a page because I got to go fix something, but knowing that at a startup, you kind of have to take steps into that, to build the fully resilient. You know where you need to go, but you need to take steps to get there instead of just starting at a fully resilient architecture.
Okay. So how does your proactive mindset, you've reached out to people, you did some contributing, right? How does that define your career, right? Apart from being part of this startup, how does that really define your career?
I think I realized, I wouldn't say early on, but definitely in the last 5 to maybe 10 years of my career, that like I needed to build my own brand. right? Not my brand as part of a company.
Yep.
And my identity was like, oh, I'm the person who works for XYZ company,
Right.
But my brand of like, who is Don Freeman and what skills do I want to grow and how do I want to interact with people outside of just this one single company? So I would say that's probably the biggest thing I've strived to, as far as being proactive about building that brand and so forth, is just realizing that again, communicate, interact, get outside of your own company you work in, and just start talking to people.
Yeah, and that's one key advice that I learned a long time ago is, right, you're the CEO of you.
Right. Yeah.
You're the CEO of you. And defining and building your own brand that really segregates yourself away from that company is really going to make you, again, successful in what you determine success is, right? I find that a lot of folks, especially in previous generations, my parents and things like that, they tie themselves to the company. They're there for 20 plus years and things like that. And then all of a sudden, they're retired or whatever, and they have no identity because their identity was that company. Yeah. I have a story of my wife's friend who was just laid off of Verizon. He was there 30 years, right? And it's like, what does he do now? Right. So I think as younger generations come to the table, I'm seeing this even with my kids, I'm trying to hone that concept in, is that, yes, you're providing a service for a company or a business or whatever, but you're not that business, unless it's your business, right? Obviously, unless it's your business, right? Yeah. But you're still the CEO of yourself. So I really think that resonates with a lot of younger folks, right? Because now you can take your skill sets and become more valuable for other folks. So that's really, really cool. Yeah. This is going to be an interesting question, especially for you, right? Because I was thinking about this. So is a GitHub history now more valuable than a 20-year resume?
So I would say no, because I have, if you look at my GitHub history, it's really green, right? But some of that green is because I was working on some Terraform or something that I just couldn't get right. And it was 20 commits to get to one fix. You know what I'm saying? So unless it's in a public repository, you can't really see what people are working on. Right. So I would say no, but I would say that when I'm interviewing someone or going to hire someone, I do take it into account, not the green chart, but what I can see about someone's open source contributions, because then I get to see how they interact with people before they knew that they were going to apply for the job that I'm interviewing them for. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, you get to see, and some of it's like college. Hey, this is what I did for my college project or something, right? Yep. So, which is fine, totally fine, right? Yep. And then like when I look at something like that, I expect like, it's going to have been a learning curve. It's going to be one giant commit, then you're not going to, or whatever, and so I take that all into account. So I would say seeing what people are doing in open source, or not even open source, just just in GitHub in general is important. Or really any Git, or source control, wherever you can see online that people are working on stuff. Yeah. But not necessarily the green boxes that show on your, little history there, whatever. So. Okay.
Do you have any mentors in this space or folks that you confide in and kind of bounce ideas off of as you were going through this decision, or is this something that you just went out on your own?
I actually went out on my own, but I would advise people who are early in their career to look for a mentor, right? I don't think I ever had that. That was a fault of my own, probably, that I didn't look for that, Right. I kind of made a lot of decisions on my own and without that, but I think it would have been great to have a mentor to kind of bounce some of those ideas off of, for sure. So I would advise people to look for that.
Good. And if you had to bet your mortgage on one piece of advice, what would that be?
One piece of advice. I would say that, try to think how to say this. So there's been a lot of times that people come to me with a new technology or a new type of problem or whatnot that I have no clue about. But I don't back away from those. The way I look at those is it's kind of like a cloud. I can't see how it all works behind that when I first am approached with it. And so I see this problem. I'm like, okay, let's see what happens, Right. So I go and I educate myself, and then I start trying to do things and learn from those mistakes and those failures. And it might take me 10 days to do what in 1 year it's going to take me 1 hour to do. But my biggest piece of advice would be like, don't back away from those challenges that people are going to bring to you, because that's the perfect opportunity to learn, especially if it's for an employer who's like, like, hey, we have this new system or blah, 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 like you're getting paid then to like take on the challenge and learn and expand your knowledge. Cause that's really where all your, I guess power, for lack of a better word, is, but is knowledge, right? Is learning in this software engineering technology space, is learning how a lot of the stuff works and getting your hands actually dirty with some of it.
Cool. Good. So I'm a new grad. I go enterprise or startup?
I think it depends a lot on several different things, financial situation and so on and so forth, other things like that. But I would say that it is very exciting to work at a startup and get to, have large impacts on our customer base and delivering new products. So it's exciting for me, and I enjoyed the startup, pattern.
Cool. So here's another one for you. Would you go back to the utility company for a 2x your salary?
I would really have to think about it. I would really have to think about it.
Yeah, I hear that. So what's one question that enterprise people are too scared to ask?
That's a tough one. There's one question that enterprise people are too scared to ask. I think it is, a lot of times in enterprise, people are aligned in teams, like this is what I work on and this is what I work on, and not wanting to cross those lines. And I think that's when I was at enterprises is I learned to like, hey, I was even doing kind of some open source stuff in my own enterprises, right? Like it's like, hey, can I contribute to what you're working on? Like I see the problem I'm having, with your application that I interact with. Can I help out? And so I think that's one thing I see people at enterprises not willing to like cross lines of teams and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So Don, someone sitting in their cubicle, Fortune 500 company. I said this before. They're on year 10 of their own utility company journey. What's your final XP or your experience point for them?
To keep learning and keep finding ways to learn, and whether that be inside the company they're in or outside of the company they're in. And I think that will lead to, the goals they're looking for.
Awesome. So as we wrap up, tell us, where can people find you? How can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you some more? Maybe ask you to be their mentor.
Yeah.
Is that something you're willing?
Yeah, sure. I try to be pretty active on LinkedIn. I could drop you my link on LinkedIn. I'm on GitHub. I don't do Twitter as much, or X, I guess it's called. X, I would say my biggest one nowadays is probably LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah. So share your LinkedIn with me. I'll post it in the show notes for other folks to do. So that's the show, folks. Remember, Don did not apply for this job. They found him, right? Not because of his resume, but because of what he did in public, right? So the lesson isn't quit your job for crypto. That's not what we're saying here, right? It's just start something, do something, something, just do it. So this has been the IT XP, and I appreciate your time.